Hey there, it's Taylor Ray here with my co-host Ryan. If you have story suggestions, news tips, corrections, or comments on anything we discuss on our show, please contact us by commenting on our Facebook page, facebook.com/1pvs2p, on Twitter at 1pvs2p_podcast, or by emailing us, podcast@1pvs2p.com.
You can also record a voicemail or send us a text at 571-418-GAME. That's 571-418-4263.
Record or write in, and we might just read or play your message on our next episode. Oculus co-founder Palmer Luckey bankrolls online Trump supporters, and VR devs aren't happy. PC players might be able to play Destiny 2, and Super Mario 64 turns 20 this week in gaming history. All that plus this week's new game releases, announcements, and more. It's Friday, September 30th, 2016, and you're listening to the 1P versus 2P podcast. I'm Taylor Ray.
I'm Ryan Ray.
Let's start off with
First Attack.
As always, our top stories from this past week in gaming. So this is kind of a weird story, a disclaimer here at the top, because we're about to get into some politics here, but it's important for our gaming show because it has an impact on video games. So Palmer Luckey, who is the millionaire, he's the co-founder of Oculus, invented the Rift headset. He sold Oculus to Facebook for $2 billion in 2014, is reportedly funding a pro-Donald Trump group called Nimble America. This is a company dedicated to trolling and also putting out memes and just general shitposting on sites like 4chan and Reddit. This all according to the Daily Beast, who broke this news last Thursday. And it's not so much an issue that he may be supporting Donald Trump, but it's the manner in which he is supporting sort of these posts on the internet. And what really further complicates the story about Luckey is that not only do his tweets show that he's favoring and supporting Trump, but also Gamergaters. And he's also in a relationship with a vocal member of the Gamergate movement. Not really a good look and seemingly very, very controversial. Ryan, why is this important for VR and the future of the Rift?
Well, VR is kind of billed as this new technology that's aspirational, right? Everybody wants a VR headset. VR is for everybody. The idea of VR in the first place is you put on this headset and you escape the horrible reality that we're actually living in. Whether or not politics has contributed to that is up to you. But anyway, VR is supposed to be this like space that's supposed to be inclusionary, like a lot of other video game industry areas. It's a thing that everybody can just put on and experience and enjoy. And news that Palmer Luckey is kind of supporting Donald Trump and doing it by bankrolling a, let's call it a group that's tied to white supremacists, you know, some people who are generally villainous internet scum.
Yep.
Are
anti-Semitic posts that are out there too.
Right. His personal politics are, that's whatever, but it's the way that he's doing it. It's the way that he's spending, the money that he got from Facebook that's really rubbing some developers the wrong way. Following this news, several VR developers pulled Oculus support for their titles. Some of the more prominent ones include upcoming Super Hypercube developers, Kokoromi and Polytron. I'll just read you a quote from their statement. It says, quote, "We cannot tacitly endorse these actions by supporting Luckey or his platform. Do not let bigotry, white supremacy, hate, and fear win." This, of course, was also being backed by other smaller studios, lots of other VR devs. Probably the biggest one out of all of these is Insomniac Games. They've worked on several Oculus titles, including Edge of Nowhere. And they said in a statement to Kotaku that they condemn all forms of hate speech. And they also added that this behavior and sentiment does not reflect the values of the many Oculus employees we work with on a daily basis. So this is affecting not just people on a personal, political level. This is also affecting Oculus and Facebook's bottom line. VR devs are pulling support for the Rift. They're opting instead now to develop their VR games exclusively for the Vive or the PS VR. And it seems like people are kind of pulling the ripcord from the Oculus after this news that he's been doing this.
Well, since this news broke, he actually responded on Facebook. Palmer Luckey actually posted to his personal Facebook account and sort of gave this sort of non-apology apology. He claimed that he's not a Trump supporter and instead plans to vote libertarian. And again, this is not to focus on his politics, but he said, quote, "I am deeply sorry that my actions are negatively impacting the perception of Oculus and its partners." And he said he contributed $10,000 to this company, this one that's responsible to memes and shit posting out there. He contributed that money to Nimble America because he's, quote, "committed to the principles of fair play and equal treatment," and thought that the organization had fresh ideas on how to communicate with young voters, end quote. You know, the thing about this whole story is not the fact that he may or may not be supporting Trump. That's not what this is about. But we do live in a free country where people they have the freedom to express their politics, their beliefs, whatever. Freedom of expression is a very important thing, especially for the gaming industry. Now, that does not come without consequences. If you may be supporting a very controversial group that might be spreading hateful speech, things like white supremacy posts, which according to the Daily Beast and other outlets, it's not a good look, and it doesn't reflect well on somebody who is the face of a company like Palmer with Oculus. You know, executives, no matter what company they're working for, they have to be very careful because they're the ones responsible for PR, the image of their company, and it's the way in which Luckey might be supporting these actions that is kind of despicable. I don't think he realizes the impact of his politics. And now we're talking about real money, real business that might be lost here. You know, VR is in a very delicate state right now. It's still trying to break into that mainstream space where people can afford and want to play these games. And I think the library for right now, you know, the Rift struggles with that a little bit, right? There are very few worthwhile games for the investment in the Rift. Like it's just right now not worth it to invest in not only a really powerful PC, but to buy the Oculus Rift. Now, this is going to make it even harder for them to sell to the mainstream. The average consumer, isn't paying attention to what political views that Palmer Luckey has, but the gaming community is, and these are the ones that are going to be, investing in VR first and reviewing it for others and really touting it and marketing it on a guerrilla level. So it's just a very weird story.
Yeah, and I have to say, we say it on the show all the time, vote with your wallet. And if you're considering purchasing an Oculus Rift, now you have to kind of really take a hard look and think about whether or not you're paying money for a device that potentially could be help fund some of these, hate groups. And Oculus has also has a diversity program. It's called Launchpad. They've tried to reach out to diverse VR creators. And there was a story from BuzzFeed this week about some of those people, those young developers who are interested in developing games on the Rift, are now questioning whether or not that's a really good idea. This is a program that is going to eventually support funding for these games, these small developers. And, if they don't get any buy-in from the developers in the first place, if they don't believe that, Oculus' supporters are really going to be behind them, or they have a political message that is really supportive of the industry and is inclusive, those people are going to pull out too. And I think that this really, I think Patrick Klepek of Vice Gaming had a very interesting take on this. This isn't the first time an executive of a video game company has been implicated in something political. Certainly, Bobby Kotick of Activision, for example, regularly donates to political campaigns. I wouldn't be surprised if there are lots of other video game publishers and companies that also holds these kinds of views, or frankly give to candidates or politicians in general. And it's just unfortunate that Luckey decided to express himself politically in this way. It's a really unfortunate story. And if you have a Rift, that this might affect what games come out on your piece of hardware. And right now I don't have a VR headset, and if I'm looking at this story and thinking about getting one, right now I'm probably going to be looking at the Vive solely based on this one fact alone. So yeah, this is probably going to hurt Oculus's bottom line, and I don't know how they're going to come back from this.
I think after this election is over, after November, after this whole sort of very polarizing election is over, I think this news will die out. But again, like you said, it's really impacting the future of games that are being developed for the Rift. These devs that are just pulling Rift support solely based on this, it's just not a very promising sign for them, and which is the reason why I think the Vive and the PlayStation VR are in a better space already. They already have a head start, and Luckey and Oculus, they're just not doing themselves any favors by not apologizing for this completely, or even having to the extreme where Luckey just resigns completely. I'm not endorsing pitchforking here, but like you said, I think vote with your dollars. It is the correct way to handle this for sure. Moving on to an interesting story that we read about this week, which is about some prominent sports figures getting into the esports scene, including people like Magic Johnson and even whole teams like the Philadelphia 76ers. So it's the 76ers that became the first North American sports franchise to purchase an esports organization earlier this year, acquiring both Team Dignitas and Apex Gaming in a merger that was announced earlier this week. This merger will combine Apex's League of Legends team, which just finished the LCS split, with Dignitas' other teams who compete in Counter-Strike, Go, Overwatch, Heroes of the Storm, and Smite currently. Very interesting. Also, there are other teams, some international soccer clubs that are also throwing their hat into the ring. FC Schalke bought a League of Legends team in Europe, while other teams such as FC Valencia and Besiktas have purchased teams in lower divisions. So, interesting stuff here. Ryan, what does this all mean?
This means that I think a lot of popular sports figures are really getting into esports. I think they probably see this as an investment, more so than them really buying into and being big fans of the esports in general. When we're talking about sports organizations like the Philadelphia 76ers, that is a big NBA team, but I wouldn't say they're like the cream of the crop. However, I think this really represents a validation of the esports kind of branding that a lot of games are going after, right? You see a lot of people complain that esports, League of Legends, Dota are appearing on channels like ESPN, and a lot of people complaining that, oh, that's not a real sport. But when actual sports figures are paying money into this system to help support the teams, help sponsor teams, help pay for championship spots, this is the kind of thing that turns esports into the kind of thing that will be eventually someday on the level of the NBA, the MLB, the NFL, these other big sports franchises. And then after the 76ers story broke, you mentioned it here at the top, another big esports acquisition happened. North American esports franchise Team Liquid, which you might have heard of, they sold a controlling interest in their own team to a group of major investors under an ownership group called Axiomatic and
Axiomatic.
I'm sorry. But among the people in this group are NBA Hall of Famer and co-owner of the LA Dodgers Magic Johnson, co-owner of the Washington Wizards and Capitals, and the Golden State Warriors co-owner. These are like big name sports guys getting into esports for real. And this is like a level of investment that we truly, really haven't seen outside of other big gaming companies.
Yeah, I think this also opens up the door for esports venues. When you're talking about, Dodgers owners like Magic Johnson, also co-owner of the Wizards and the Warriors, if they're investing in these teams, it's likely that we're going to see a lot of esports events being held in these stadiums in the off season. I think that's safe to assume, right? You can predict that these owners who are investing in these teams, want to sponsor them heavily. They believe it's a good investment because they're seeing the rising popularity, the money that's involved, the prize pools, and they're seeing a golden business opportunity here. For them, I'm sure it's a worthwhile investment. I'm sure it's going to pay dividends down the road.
I'm sure, just like fantasy football, I someday will look forward to drafting fantasy Dota players and acquiring people on my team. And Yeah, that may be a thing one day with some sports figures getting into this business.
And it's very, very exciting news for esports fans all around, for sure.
So how do I get Shaq to buy EA and re-release Road Rash?
Now that's the next step. As soon as they started getting into development, well, there's not really a good track record of that, i.e. Kurt Schilling. That's a whole nother episode, but I hope there's a brighter future for athletes getting involved in video game development. But for esports, let's leave it at that for now. Let's move on to a story about No Man's Sky. We haven't discussed this in a while, but now Hello Games, their developer, has come under fire and now under investigation by the Advertising Standards Authority out of the UK. So the ASA is actually a UK-based watchdog authority. They confirmed to Eurogamer that they're investigating Hello Games' advertising practices, specifically addressing, quote, several complaints about No Man's Sky advertising. And this is specifically revolving around the Steam store page. The ASA, just to give you a little bit of background, because this is actually the first I had heard about it, because it's UK based. After doing a little bit of research, the ASA has the power to have advertisements it believes are in breach of its code of conduct withdrawn and prevent them from appearing again. So, for example, if an advertiser refuses to comply with an ASA ruling, it can impose sanctions like asking search websites, engines to remove a marketer's paid-for search ads. So they've contacted both Hello Games and Valve and asked them to respond to a raft of questions, a lot of questions relating to all these No Man's Sky advertisements. Ryan, let's break it down. I mean, what's going on here?
It seems like the fervor around the release of No Man's Sky on the Steam store page right now, if you look, there are all sorts of trailers for that game dating back from when that game was first announced. And it shows the game in several different states, none of which is what the game's final release actually looks like. And I think that's what people are really taking issue with. Calling foul, they're saying that they didn't get the game that they were really promised on. And that's what this whole fervor has been all about. And this is just a formalized complaint version of that. While these complaints specifically target the Steam store page, the ASA has said that any ruling that they confer on this would also apply to other advertising for No Man's Sky, such as official YouTube videos and the game's listing on the PSN store. So if they decide to rule against Hello Games, they could eventually affect this game's bottom line. I don't know how this hasn't happened already, frankly. After all the complaining that people did, after all the people really asked for returns on this game, Hello Games has since released like a patch for the game and has otherwise been radio silent as far as feedback and like we hear you, that kind of thing. It's been a really long, drawn out controversy for this game, and it's one that I like keeps some people away from the game. Like, I'm not interested in playing No Man's Sky after hearing all this. It seems like an interesting game from what I've seen, and it may not be this year's most disappointing game, but it certainly doesn't seem like the thing that people really wanted out of it. And whether or not that some of their advertising, some of their pitch, the Hello Games guy went on to Stephen Colbert, did all sorts of press for this game, and was showing something that was really unfinished. This game probably should have been in early access from the get-go, and probably would have sidestepped a lot of this controversy that came along with it.
Well, that guy you mentioned, his name is Sean Murray, the director of No Man's Sky. He was the face from Hello Games that heavily advertised, like went on, a bunch of shows like Colbert, and showed off and touted a lot of features that aren't there. And most importantly, it was the fact that multiplayer is just not there, period. And, a while back, it was back in August, right after this game was released, we actually had a whole episode dedicated to discussing No Man's Sky. It was episode 59 with our guest, Alex Moreni, and he gave a very cautionary endorsement about the game. He enjoyed it personally, but also relented the fact that it's really not for everyone. And I would have to agree with that because I shortly bought the game right thereafter. And No Man's Sky, I have to say, is one of my biggest disappointments for this year. There's just not a ton there. And, I think there's the argument to be made that there was a ton of hype. justified or unjustified, that surrounded this game. And, there was a lot of backing by Sony. Sony showed it off a ton at the PlayStation Experience, at E3. They had live demos. And then suddenly the game releases earlier in August, and a lot of stuff that was shown is simply just missing. So there was some misdirection here, and I think made a lot of fans rightfully angry. I can understand their frustration. So what really also makes the story a little more interesting is that Sony boss Shuhei Yoshida at the Tokyo Game Show told Eurogamer's Dan Silver recently that, despite Sony helping Hello Games market and publish No Man's Sky, he told Silver that he liked the game, but thought that they could have done a better job with the whole, quote, public relations thing, which is kind of like throwing their business partner under the bus. That's what it sounds like to me.
That's not under the bus. That's like, hey, look at the bottom of my shoe. Boom. It's a really bad look for Sony, I think. Sony has touted the fact that they're trying to really support indie devs. They said, come to our platform. We're really open to indie devs developing games for the PS4 and Vita. And then they put this game, No Man's Sky, prominently. They featured in many, many different shows. They practically do the job of PR for the game. And then all of a sudden the game comes out and it's like, well, we're not holding the bag anymore. Sorry. That's a really crappy move on Sony's part. And if I were an indie dev, I would think twice about making a big business deal with Sony now after this Hello Games thing and No Man's Sky. What a bad look.
Yeah, the direct quote was, I understand some of the criticisms, especially Sean Murray is getting, because he sounded like he was promising more features in the game from day one. It wasn't a great PR strategy because he didn't have a PR person helping him. And in the end, he is an indie developer. But he says their plan is to continue to develop No Man's Sky's features and such, and I'm looking forward to continuing to play the game. End quote. That by Yoshida. He sums it all right there. But despite all of that, again, No Man's Sky still under investigation by the ASA. So the story is not over. But despite Sean Murray on Twitter being radio silent as the the director from Hello Games actually did post on September 2nd. That was the last update they have on their development blog. They wrote on a blog post that, and I'm going to read it in part to you. It said, quote, "Hello, over the last few weeks, since No Man's Sky released, we've been inundated with feedback and discussion about No Man's Sky. No matter what feedback you gave us, you've been heard and we are listening carefully. Thank you. What matters now, as always, is what we do rather than what we say. We're developers and our focus is first on resolving any issues people have with the game as it is, then on future free updates which will improve, expand, and build on the No Man's Sky universe. This is a labor of love for us and it's just the beginning." End quote. Thoughtful, but really sort of sidesteps a lot of the major criticisms about the game. They make no mention about what features were missing, what feedback people were giving about the game. And it's a disaster. It's kind of a dumpster fire, in my opinion. And I just don't know if I can recommend that game right now to anyone playing this year. I totally understand where this investigation is coming from and all the sort of controversy and the frustration surrounding Hello Games and No Man's Sky. It's missing quite a bit that was shown off before. All right, enough about No Man's Sky. Let's move on to our new video game releases.
I love new releases.
This is actually a game that came out earlier this year on PC, but XCOM 2 out now on consoles on PS4 and Xbox One.
Just like they said they would never do, right?
Yeah.
It's totally crazy that they're reneging on that. I'm not surprised that this eventually was going to happen. The original XCOM Enemy Unknown sold pretty well on consoles, and I'm surprised that they didn't make this announcement from the get-go. But, XCOM 2, I played it on PC. I didn't finish it. I would say that if you're a fan of XCOM Enemy Unknown, it's probably a lesser game. They changed some of the mechanics. They made the game a little bit harder. It's definitely a more interesting game than the original, but I think they made some tweaks and balances that I don't think a lot of people really dug. So if you're interested in checking out, I would, I'm glad more people are going to get to play it on PS4 and Xbox One. But the PC version, it has been heavily discounted at this point. And if you're interested in the continuing to see that franchise go on, possibly for an XCOM 3, maybe pick up XCOM 2.
As a brutally hard tactics style game, is it more difficult than XCOM Enemy Unknown?
They've changed some of the balancing around it. I would say if you were playing on the harder setting on the original XCOM Enemy Unknown, you're probably better off with starting off with normal, because some of the mechanics drastically change the way melee happens, some of the psiotic powers, some of the gunplay in the game. It's very easy for your soldiers to die. I remember a mission that I played, a story mission that everybody does eventually play, where you're basically trying to hold down your crashed ship. And basically only one of my guys survived. And that's not something that happened to me in the last XCOM game. It's a lot harder. So if you're interested in kind of a more brutal version of that game, it's definitely more challenging.
We've also got River City Tokyo Rumble out on 3DS. This is very similar to the gameplay and visual style of River City Ransom, that really old cult classic NES brawler.
Right. River City Ransom is celebrating, I think, a 30-year anniversary. And this is kind of the, long-awaited sequel, right? We've had a bunch of River City spin-off games. But basically, if you're not familiar with this game, this is kind of the original River City Ransom was kind of a niche RPG, niche brawler game, beat 'em up with some light RPG mechanics. And this game is on the 3DS and is kind of expanding on some of those mechanics. It adds kind of an open world. It takes place in Tokyo. The main character's name is Kunio. If you've seen the art style of River City Ransom, it's just like that. Very 8-bit stylized game. But basically, you're fighting off mobs of rivals and local punks, all trying to clean up the streets of Tokyo. And reviewers have been saying that the game's combat is pretty basic when compared to other games in this genre, but it's not really a huge mark against it. The controls are very easy to pick up, much like games like Double Dragon Neon, Battletoads. This is kind of a breeze for players of all skill levels to really start punching and kicking guys in a really fun way. So I'm super interested in checking this out. River City Ransom is one of those games that's kind of a hidden NES gem. And I think if you're interested in this kind of gameplay, definitely check it out on the 3DS.
Yeah, it's 8-bit sprites in a 3D space. It's kind of a neat update, but fun, fast-paced brawler, beat 'em up nonetheless. So check out the trailer. It's linked in the show notes. It's a trailer for the Japanese version, but it's available now on the North America Nintendo 3DS eShop. Moving on to Azure Striker Gunvolt 2, also on the 3DS. Ryan, tell me all about it.
So this is the follow-up to that very not well-known game, Azure Striker Gunvolt. Basically, if you're looking for a Mega Man-style game, Inti Creates has done that job for you. The original game was quite an homage while adding a lot of interesting mechanics. It's a lot more fast-paced. Basically, the game has kind of a combo system where the faster you take down enemies, your combo builds up and you get a higher score, and the higher score gets you more upgrades, so on and so forth. It has these Mega Man-style bosses. It has really cool weapon upgrade system, really nice music, really fun gameplay. And I'm surprised that a lot of people didn't check it out back when it came out in 2014. But this is the follow-up to that game. It adds a second playable character who's kind of an anti-hero named Copen. And he has a little bit of a different play style. Kind of think about Mega Man and Proto Man, how those different played in the original Mega Man games. That's kind of the same analogy we're making here. And just like a really neat game. If you missed out on the first game, Yacht Club Games, which is the publisher of this game, they're the developers actually behind Shovel Knight. They're just publishing this game. Inti Creates actually developed the game. They are putting both games in a single cartridge at retailers called the Azure Strike Gunvolt Striker Pack, and you can get both games for $30. Separately on the eShop, they're about $15. So no discount, but at least you're getting both games on a single cartridge. Really cool game if you like that Mega Man style gameplay, and Mighty Number 9 didn't quite grab you the right way. This is definitely the game to play.
Seems like a good value. And last but not least, we have Yokai Watch 2. Two separate versions, Bony Spirits and Fleshy Spirits.
Right. So this is the second game in the Yokai Watch franchise. In Japan, they're actually already on Yokai Watch 3, but Nintendo seems to be taking the Pokemon route of splitting up the game's collectible monsters, which are called yokai, across two different versions of the game. Reviewers have said that there are a few added minigames and a little bit of a different setting. But the somewhat turn-based combat has returned from the first game. A lot of people were kind of indifferent to slightly negative about that. It's a little bit different than most 3DS RPGs, but if you're looking for a Japanese Pokemon-style RPG and you're just tired of Pokemon, maybe Yokai Watch is up your alley.
I did try the demo to Yokai Watch 1 because I was very, very curious about it. And the battle system I thought was very weird and somewhat randomized, with this spinner affecting, stats and actions that you're taking with your party. Ryan, did you ever try Yokai Watch 1?
Yeah, I did a little bit, and you're right. I didn't like that aspect of it so much. I think it's neat that Nintendo and Level 5, who's the developer of this game, is branching out and trying something different with kind of this like monster catching formula. Seems to be super popular in Japan. If you go to Japan, you'll see these characters. The Pikachu equivalent is this orange cat-like thing called Gibeon. He's all over the place. Very, very popular, but it didn't quite catch on, I think, the way that the original Pokemon did 20 years ago. And I think they're still trying to make a go of it. They really need to do a better job of making the mechanics a little more fleshed out, maybe a little less random for, I think, it to really catch on here in the West.
Let's go on to our new video game announcements, shall we?
Here comes a new challenger!
This is unconfirmed right now, but sources say that Destiny 2, which is again, currently unannounced, but expected next year as a sequel to Destiny, is coming to PC in addition to Xbox One and PS4. Kotaku's Jason Schreier is also reporting that Bungie aims to make Destiny 2 feel like an entirely new game rather than sort of a Taken King style expansion, completely different than Destiny 1. So these rumors popped up on NeoGAF. And sort of the comparisons that are being made here so far is that you look at Blizzard's approach to the Diablo series, the jump, the delta from Diablo 1 to Diablo 2 was huge. And Diablo 2 just was extremely, extremely popular. And I think it seems like Bungie, the speculation here is that they want to take a similar strategy here in, completely revamping what made Destiny so compelling, but sort of scaling back what made Destiny 1, so unpopular with a lot of people, including you and me.
Right. I'm just surprised that this rumor is kind of coming out hot and heavy. I think the speculation around Destiny has really been at a fever pitch. And, there's part of this rumor is that also, for Destiny 2, you're not going to be able to transfer your old characters that people have at this point spent tons and tons of hours plunking into Taken King. They just released that Rise of Iron. We talked about it last week, expansion. And for all these people to play a basically MMO style game and for the sequel to not have the characters go along with them seems kind of a slap in the face, because that's originally what they said they were aiming to do, right? That your character would live on for 10 years. It would be part of this universe. It would go on from game to game to game. And instead, they're seemingly going to take an approach, much like Blizzard did, that the products are two separate things. If it really bears out, would be super awesome. I would love for Destiny 2 to be more like Diablo 2 and less like Destiny 1. But I don't, who knows if that's going to bear out?
But in what ways? In what ways? What do you mean by that?
Well, for one thing, I think the loot randomization needs to be a lot better in Destiny 2. The loot drops in Diablo 2 felt very fair and also felt like it was empowering you without going overboard. It didn't seem like you were really fighting really super hard enemies to get the best gear. Same case with Diablo 3, by the way. They did eventually add lots of different difficulty levels to that game and lots of patches and made it a lot more customizable experience. Same thing with Diablo 2. And, Destiny 1 has kind of lots of limited options at this point. And to get the best gear, you're basically playing the same levels over and over and over and over again. And I think that's the part that has people kind of like up in arms. It's really frustrating. It's one of those things where like you hear about all the like cheese strategies for people to try to get the best loot in Destiny, and you have to just kind of like shake your head like, why are people doing this? This is insane. Why are people spending so much time? Like the gunplay in Destiny is like unrivaled, right? It's the best first-person shooter on the market, but it has all these like bad MMO style loot tricks that really bog it down. And if they fix that, Destiny 2 could be like the best shooter ever made. But until that bears out, until we see that this actual product and it doesn't turn into another situation like Destiny 1 where we wait for expansion after expansion and it's the same thing over and over again, like I don't know. I would take this news right now as a mixed bag until we see more gameplay footage, until we know more about what Destiny 2 actually is.
Yeah, really well said there. I agree with you completely. Like, Destiny 1 was disappointing because it was so repetitive. The universe and the story was so buried in a separate area, right? You had to read sort of the lore online. It wasn't in-game. You just were retracing your steps to the same areas over and over and over again. It was difficult to coordinate raids in-game. Like, these are just like basic fundamental things that if you're going to make a multiplayer shooter, MMO-style shooter, these are the things you should focus on the most. And the fact that the loot drops were just, I remember, it just came down to everyone just exploiting loot caves, killing higher level enemies over and over and over and over again just to see if they could get better loot. But it just took way, way too long to acquire these by normal means, just playing through the game normally without having to resort to these exploits. It just was a huge, huge bummer. And I'm just hoping that, and this is shocking to me, I saw the numbers of the employees of Bungie and also Activision, High Moon, Vicarious Visions, all developing this game. The number is like upwards of 750 people working on this thing. So it's a huge, huge monumental project. They're dumping a lot of money into this thing. And I really, really, really hope that it's worthwhile. This news about Destiny 2, you're right, we have to take it with a grain of salt. But it's exciting nonetheless, and hopefully it comes out by the end of next year.
With all these people working on it, hopefully it turns out more like Diablo 2 and less like Assassin's Creed 2, right? Like a Ubisoft game with tons and tons of employees working on it, and it turns out to be a total piece of crap. High hopes for Destiny 2, but take it very carefully.
Next, we have on our list for new game announcements, the Bit Trip series is picking back up with Runner 3. Choice Provisions is following up its excellent obstacle course platform. The last one was Bit Trip Presents Runner 2, Future Legend of Rhythm Alien. Super long title, I know. This one is just being shortened to Runner 3. So if you like that rhythm-based endless runner, maybe check this one out. The trailer is at the link in the show notes.
Yeah, Runner 2 was a really cool, colorful game. A lot of fun, very beautiful, and very easy to play control scheme. And I think if you like games like Temple Run, these games typically come out on all sorts of platforms. And I'm looking forward to Runner 3. It's actually this franchise, the Bit Trip franchise, has been a long time on portable consoles, and Runner 2 was also very excellent. Highly excited for Runner 3. Want to see more gameplay footage out of that.
And if you're unfamiliar to the Bit Trip series, if you missed out on Runner and Runner 2, it's actually a good time right now to pick them up because both of those games are half price on Steam, Wii U, Vita, and PS4 until October 2nd this weekend, so you'll have to pick them up quick. But Runner 3, unconfirmed for which platforms. The teaser trailer was extremely short, but we do know it's just coming out next year so far. And another sort of weird indie game, Nidhogg, is getting a sequel announced for 2017, Nidhogg 2. There's a new trailer for it. If you remember Nidhogg 1, that game was the side-scrolling local multiplayer fencing game. It was really fun. Ryan, you and I played that together. But it had these sort of Atari-like graphics, very minimalistic. This time, however, it has sort of this retro 16-bit art style to it. And the environments, I mean, the trailer, it makes it look excellent, much more visually compelling. And this time, the characters, instead of being these blocky 8-bit or lower characters, I would describe them as hairless nude models of Bert and Ernie from Sesame Street. That's the characters you're controlling on both ends of the screen, fencing each other.
Yeah, the original game was very stylish, a lot of fun to play in short bursts, a great local multiplayer game. They seem to be adding a little bit more depth in this game. They're going to be adding 10 plus levels instead of, I think, the 4 in the original game. They're going to have local and online multiplayer and a tournament mode. And they're going to include a single-player campaign against a series of AI opponents with an occasional challenge round to mix it up. And a completely new soundtrack. The original game had this very tense, dramatic fencing music. And they're adding some independent artists to that soundtrack for Nidhogg 2. It looks super cool. I'm excited for this. Like you said at the top, this is a weird indie game, but a weird indie game that was super awesome. I'm glad it came. We don't see a lot of games come out in this category and actually be fun to play. And Nidhogg is definitely something I would put up there. Super looking forward to Nidhogg 2.
This week in gaming history.
This week in gaming history, Super Mario 64 was released on the N64 on September 29th, 1996, making it 20 years old. And along with Pilot Wings 64, it was a launch title, so it shares the same birthday as the N64 console itself. So happy birthday to both of them. Man, this game just really revolutionized 3D gaming. It's the best-selling game ever on the Nintendo 64, with more than 11 million copies sold to date. There was this also enhanced remake called Super Mario 64 DS, which was released on the DS in 2004, which I have to say was an improved version, because not only could you play as Mario in the same levels, but you could also play as Luigi, Wario, and Yoshi, all with their individual unique movesets, which I kind of enjoyed. It was a good add there. So, if you've never played Super Mario 64, how dare you? I mean, this game was just phenomenal, really revolutionized 3D gaming as we know it today. If you look at games like Banjo-Kazooie, I mean, I literally could name any 3D game, and there's been some sort of inspiration drawn from Super Mario 64. Just what a phenomenal, all-time classic, great video game.
I mean, we talk about Super Mario Brothers as kind of like gaming's first language, right? It's the kind of universal thing that everybody plays and understands. And for a long time prior to Super Mario 64, we had these 2D side-scrolling platforming games that, while very fun, some people, it was going to be hard to kind of transition into the next phase of technology, the next phase of video gaming, without this seminal title. Super Mario 64 is kind of the moment where I think a lot of people just their jaws dropped. I remember getting the console on launch day. I went to the KB Toys, which if you want to think about that doesn't exist anymore, right? I remember saving up all my lunch money, all my allowance money, buying an N64, it came with Mario 64, and coming home, racing home to play it. And I just remember being shocked and I cried. It was so beautiful. It was an amazing experience to see Mario in 3D for the first time. The thing for me, the level that really stood out for me was that first water level. It was just beautiful. It looked awesome. It was also the first time Mario was really voiced, right? This is the game that kind of made a career out of Charles Martinet, who's the voice of Mario ever since Super Mario 64. What a fun game. The controls were super awesome, even with that weird N64 controller. Controls for Mario felt super precise. There were boss battles against Bowser where you were basically rotating him around an arena. That was super fun. Collecting all 120 stars was also awesome. The game had a ton of secrets, a ton of interesting levels. Really a great game. I would put it in the top 10 games of all time. Maybe at the in the top 3 or top 5. It's just a phenomenal Mario game. Probably only second fiddle to maybe Super Mario 3 and Super Mario World. Just an excellent game in the franchise.
I do remember the camera system being sort of revolutionary. You use the C buttons on the N64 controller, which admittedly was a little awkward at first, but it still worked out pretty well. It was this dynamic camera system. You weren't just static, always staring at the same character at the same position on screen. You were free to zoom in, zoom out, explore also. When Mario was stationary, you could look in first-person mode to sort of look in the 3D space and see where you needed to jump or platform to next. It was excellent. The movement of Mario felt phenomenal. You could freely dive, you could punch and kick, you could backflip, you could triple jump to get to really high heights. You could slide in ice levels. I mean, there was just so much Mario could do that he wasn't able to do before in these 2D platformers. And this jump from 2D gaming, I mean, what Super Mario Brothers did originally on the NES for 2D platformers, you can compare it to what Super Mario 64 did for 3D gaming. I can't understate its impact on the industry as a whole. And it's one of Miyamoto's personal favorites. I mean, he worked on this game heavily, and it's still one of the most popular games on the N64, and we know a lot of them, right? You can think about GoldenEye 007, Perfect Dark, Banjo-Kazooie, just to name a few. I mean, the list goes on. Legend of Zelda, Ocarina of Time. Even if you look at Ocarina of Time, which is also considered to be one of the greatest video games of all time, still draws a lot of its gameplay mechanics from the success from Super Mario 64.
Yeah, I'd also have to say that this game also has very memorable soundtrack. A lot of tunes that are still playing in my head, like a lot of Mario games. This is probably Mario at the height of its power, right? Like, every 3D Mario game since then has basically taken the Mario 64 template and tried to do something different from it, right? We've had Mario Sunshine on the GameCube. We've had Mario Galaxy on the Wii. Galaxy 2 also on the Wii. 3D Land and 3D World on the 3DS and Wii U, respectively. Every one of these games is taking off of the Mario 64 template and doing something different to it, adding different powers, so on and so forth. And frankly, I think if Nintendo announced tomorrow that there was going to be a Super Mario 64 2, I think they would sell out of their entire stock completely. That would be an amazing announcement. This game is like that important in Nintendo's history, and frankly, for the future of Mario on the whole. Just what a memorable game. Happy birthday to Super Mario 64, 20 years old. Could not be prouder to have enjoyed that game in its prime and to continue to enjoy it today.
I would settle for a remaster. Are you listening, Nintendo? Come on. All right, let's wrap it up with the bonus stage. Ryan, you ready for these?
Yeah, let's do it. All right, this is a PSA for everybody out there. The original Forza Horizon on 360 will reach its end-of-life status on October 20th. This means that the game, which launched 4 years ago on the 360 and its DLC, will no longer be available for purchase on the Xbox Store. However, anyone who has bought the game or has acquired its DLC prior to then will still be able to download and play the game as normal, which is very interesting news because they just made that game backwards compatible on the Xbox One.
And it's also very weird that they just included this game free as part of the Games with Gold program, so a very weird choice there. I don't know why they decided to delist it. Firewatch developer Campo Santo is moving into film development with an adaptation of its indie adventure game that came out earlier this year as its first theatrical project. There's neither a cast nor a release date set in stone for the upcoming film, although Mad Men's Rich Sommer voiced the game's lead character, Henry.
You know, if you've played Firewatch, you're basically playing a movie already. It's a very short game, about 2 hours, about the length of a movie, actually. So I'm just surprised that they're actually trying to make a movie out of this. Dude, just play the game. It's cheap at this point, and if you're interested in Firewatch, there you go. All right, moving on. Finally, the English version of the Final Fantasy trading card game, available in Japan for a long time, is launching in Europe and North America on October 28th. The first set, which is being called Opus 1, features 216 cards and features characters and art from the Final Fantasy VII Remake, Dissidia, and Worlds of Final Fantasy, and each card in the set will have a premium foil counterpart.
You know, back in the day, we used to be Pokemon trading card game gym leaders. What would be the equivalent to Final Fantasy? What do you think we would be?
I guess we'd be summon monsters? I kind of looked at how you'd play this game, and this is basically Magic the Gathering, but Final Fantasy.
Oh no, my wallet. All right, that's it. Remember to listen and subscribe to our show, the 1P versus 2P podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts, including iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play Music, TuneIn, or Clamor. You can also bookmark our site, 1pvs2p.com, or you can also read our gaming blog there too.
Our sources for this week's stories have been posted at the link in the show notes. Don't forget to like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at 1pvs2p_podcast. We're very active on Twitter.
As always, we want to thank Phonetic Hero for the use of his songs for our show, Coffee Stomp and Super Manly Brothers X, part of the compilation project Chiptunes Equals Win. I'm Taylor Ray. That's my co-host Ryan Ray. Thanks for listening. See you next week.